My Hero Academia is a world where about 80% of people have quirks. But what if someone from another planet showed up? Would they fit in and become a great hero? Would they thrive in this heroic society? Or would they inevitably be shunned for being so different, from being from an entirely different world, from being granted abilities that aren't associated with a quirk? Well, that's what we're talking today, because today we're talking My Hero Academia meets Invincible. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, so getting right into it, Invincible joins the world of My Hero Academia. And as many of you may know, the best path to becoming a hero in the world of My Hero Academia is to first attend the prestigious school of UA. And thus, Invincible's journey truly begins. And the first step in his journey to becoming a great hero in this universe is the entrance exam at UA. Now, how exactly do I think Invincible would fare in this entrance exam? Well, honestly, I think he would do very well in the entrance exam. Now, we do know there is a written portion of the exam, and while the show hasn't really articulated how smart Invincible truly is, he also isn't a dummy. So I feel like it's safe to assume if someone like Kaminari was able to pass the written portion of the exam, it does stand to reason that Mark Grayson would be able to do the same. And after that, we would get the practical exam. And as we all know, that essentially entails just battling against a bunch of robots. And considering the fact that Bakugo was the one who got the highest score on the entrance exam, there is a very good possibility that Invincible would end up with the highest score. Because keep in mind, not only is Invincible faster than Bakugo, especially at this point in time, and not only does Invincible have a greater capability to destroy robots than Bakugo does, especially at this point in time, we also have another factor of the practical exam. And this is shown by what happens with Deku. And that is, they don't just take into account how many different robots you can destroy. Yes, Bakugo did get the top score because he destroyed the most robots, earning him the most points, but there was an entirely different category they were keeping track of as well. And that category is rescue points. So I feel like not only would Invincible probably be able to match the amount of robots that were destroyed by Bakugo, I think it does stand to reason that when those 0-point robots do make their appearance and possibly jeopardize multiple people taking the entrance exam, knowing the type of person that Invincible was, especially during season 1, it does stand to reason that he would probably make a great effort to not only save all of the people in danger, but he'd probably end up taking out a bunch of those 0-point robots. Now, we do know that he doesn't get any actual points for taking out the robots themselves, but he's going to get an absurd amount of rescue points for not only taking out those robots, ensuring that they won't be able to do harm to any of the other examinees, but he's also going to likely be rescuing some of them from whatever circumstances they are currently in because of the 0-point robots. So it does stand to reason that his rescue points are probably going to surpass even what Deku had. And it also stands to reason, based on the level of power that Invincible had at this point, that he'd probably end up with a higher score than Bakugo had for destroying robots. So given that, he is going to not only get the #1 top score, he is probably going to blow away every single one of the proctors that are examining this test, right away demonstrating how great of a hero he truly can be. But after that, the next major event that Invincible would be a part of would be the attack on the USJ. He would be one of the students that is there for rescue training. And honestly, Invincible being there probably means that Aizawa doesn't end up getting injured. And this is going to play out a lot differently, because we see throughout the course of these episodes that the villains that were brought there are not top tier villains. In fact, this is actually alluded to by Todoroki. He takes out multiple villains with relative ease, and he even states that most of these villains are amateurs. They are so low level that they don't even stand a chance against kids, and Todoroki is able to no-diff multiple villains on his own. But Bakugo and Kirishima were also able to take out multiple villains on their own. Not only that, Ojiro was also on his own, and he took out multiple villains. Koda and Tsukuyomi were also on their own. So it does stand to reason, if all of his classmates are able to stand up to these villains, that Mark would definitely be able to take out multiple of these villains with relative ease. And in fact, once he sees inevitably Aizawa in a ton of trouble, being surrounded by multiple villains, I feel like that's the moment Invincible would swoop in, and Invincible would go crazy, taking out multiple villains in that moment. We saw in season 1, when Eve was potentially about to die, Invincible just go berserk, take out a bunch of the enemies, and get to Eve, saving her. Invincible, even at the start, has an absurd amount of power. Now, after he and Aizawa are able to dispatch most of the villains, this is when Shigaraki and Nomu would inevitably join the fight. And when it comes to Shigaraki, although he becomes absurdly powerful by the end of the series, at this point in time, he is not that strong at all. As long as you don't let him touch you, value and utilize his decay ability, he realistically can't do anything, especially not anything to mark. And considering the fact that Mr. Aizawa would be right there, it does stand to reason that Shigaraki's quirk would likely be taken out of the equation entirely. And although we know there is a time limit for Aizawa's erasure, at least, it does stand to reason that Invincible would be able to take out Shigaraki relatively quickly. And then that would leave them with only one enemy that they have to take out, that being Nomu. And while I don't personally believe that Invincible would have the ability to go toe-to-toe with Nomu like All Might did, being able to overwhelm his shock absorption ability, I don't think that's going to come into play. And here's why. Keep in mind, this is a version of Mr. Aizawa that didn't sustain the same injury. Invincible arrived there before that happened. And considering the fact that the last enemy left is Nomu, it does stand to reason that Mr. Aizawa would probably end up erasing all of Nomu's quirks. And now, while that doesn't get rid of his absurd strength and his modified body, it does get rid of his ability to not only regenerate, but also his ability for shock absorption. So it does stand to reason that even though Invincible doesn't have the ability to string together the amount of attacks that All Might did in that moment to defeat Nomu, he's not going to have to, because he's not going to be battling a version of Nomu that has the ability to regenerate, but also doesn't have the ability to absorb the impact from those blows. So it does stand to reason that Invincible is probably going to take out Nomu relatively quickly. Now, he is probably going to sustain a little bit of damage because keep in mind, Nomu is incredibly strong and almost at the levels of strength that All Might possesses. So if he is hit multiple times by Nomu, it is going to do significant damage to Invincible. However, considering the fact that Invincible is definitely faster than Nomu, it does stand to reason that he would be able to control the landscape of this fight and keep things on his terms. He also has the ability to fly, which this particular Nomu does not possess the ability to do. So considering all of that, I feel like if this fight happens 10 times, Invincible wins it at least 6 times out of 10. However, considering the fact that not only would Aizawa be there helping him using his erasure, he'd also be there to help when it comes to combat. And considering the fact that Todoroki, Bakugo, and Kirishima do eventually show up to help out All Might, it does stand to reason that they would probably show up in this moment. And considering the fact that Todoroki was able to freeze half of Nomu, that required him literally sacrificing one of his arms and legs and counting on his regeneration ability, it does stand to reason that all of them combined would be able to take out Nomu. So that 6 out of 10 times probably goes up to 8 or 9 out of 10 times. And they win this battle almost every single time. Everything gets solved even before All Might arrives. And this is going to shine a brighter light on Invincible than already was there before. This is going to give him a lot of admiration from all of his other classmates. It's going to earn him the respect from a lot of his other classmates. But it's also going to earn him a lot of respect from the teachers who were there, from Aizawa specifically, who would probably know that he likely would have been a goner without Invincible, or at least sustained significant injuries, like we saw in the original story. But after all the craziness of the USJ does conclude, the next major event that Invincible would be a part of would be the UA Sports Festival. And the first part of the Sports Festival would be probably the easiest portion for Invincible. You see, all it is a race. It's essentially an obstacle course, but none of these obstacles are going to be able to do anything to Invincible. And do you want to know why? It is because he simply has the ability to fly. All he needs to do is fly up over all the obstacles and land over at the finish line. And considering the fact that no one outside of Bakugo could probably reach him in the sky, it does stand to reason that no one's going to be able to catch up to him and stop him in those moments. So he is going to end up with first place in the first obstacle course. Then that brings us to the cavalry battle. And Invincible in the cavalry battle would probably be so absurdly difficult to beat. I feel like anyone that ends up on his team is virtually guaranteed a spot in the finals. And here's why. We saw that Deku's entire plan relied on Uravity and Hatsume being able to keep them on the move, being able to keep them in the air. However, what's stopping Invincible from simply flying up with his team out of reach of anyone else? And as I mentioned before, yes, Bakugo could probably reach those heights. However, if they simply have one person to defend, maybe someone like Tokuyami with his Dark Shadow, even though that Dark Shadow is weaker to Bakugo's attacks, it would still be able to knock him off balance to the point where he's not able to get a good hit on Invincible and his team when they're literally up in the air. And all Invincible has to do is fly around at a height that the other contestants can't possibly reach. And considering the fact that he would have had the 1 million points, it does stand to reason that they would end up with those 1 million points by the end of the cavalry battle. And the only people that could realistically challenge him would be if Uravity had the ability to float someone up to that height. However, considering the fact that by this point she struggles to do that for long periods of time, it would be very difficult. And as I mentioned before, Bakugo being being able to do that at this point in time would be a lot more difficult for him. Not to mention the fact that when he inevitably makes it back down to the ground, his team's going to have to be able to catch him every single time. This is going to become increasingly more difficult as the cavalry battle goes on. So that's why I truly believe that by simply playing keep away in this moment, the cavalry battle is probably going to be another easy win for Invincible, propelling him to the battle portion of the Sports Fest. And in that battle portion, Invincible is going to wipe the floor with essentially everyone that's at the Sports Fest. However, in the spirit of fairness, I'm going to match him up with the 3 people that I believe have the best chance to take him out. So first, in his first matchup, we are going to have him going up against Bakugo. Now, Bakugo is one of the people that I think has the best chance of taking on Invincible and potentially winning, mainly because of the power of his explosion quirk. However, we do have to keep a couple things in mind. This is before Bakugo obtained absurd levels of speed. This is also before he could do moves like his AP shot, more controlled explosions. Yes, he has access to absurd levels of explosions in this moment. However, they do also put a great strain on his body. And he even tells us that's why he utilizes his gauntlets with his suit, so he can fire off those high intensity explosions without doing a ton of damage to his own body each and every time. So do I think there is a chance where Bakugo is able to utilize 1 or 2 of his insanely powerful explosions to blast Invincible out of the ring, declaring himself the winner? Yes, absolutely. However, if this battle happened 10 times, I don't think he could do that more than 1 or 2 times. And considering the fact that that is his only win state in this moment, I think Invincible is probably going to take this battle relatively easily, mostly because Invincible is way faster than Bakugo is. He could theoretically just speed blitz Bakugo and end the battle relatively quickly. And not only that, his strength far surpasses any durability feats that we've seen from Bakugo, especially at this point in time. So it does stand to reason if Invincible does attempt to speed blitz Bakugo, or maybe even dodges one of Bakugo's attacks and then counterattacks and hits Bakugo once, he could probably send him flying to the point where Bakugo ends up out of bounds. He also could end up one-shotting Bakugo to the point where Bakugo is rendered incapacitated by Invincible's attack. And keep in mind, Invincible also has the power of flight, and that would come into play in this battle, especially helping Invincible to dodge a lot of Bakugo's attacks. So it's for that reason that I'm saying Invincible in this moment would end up the victor, allowing him to advance in this tournament. Now, after this, the next matchup would be between Shoto Todoroki and Invincible. And this fight, while it would be a lot closer than the previous one, I still think Invincible wins relatively easily, probably 7 or 8 times out of 10. And this one simply comes down to speed. Shoto doesn't have any type of speed feats, especially at this point in time, to compete with the level of speed that Invincible has. He would likely be able to speed blitz Todoroki at the start of their fight. And even if Shoto were to utilize his ice to try to keep Invincible away, it does stand to reason that Invincible is probably going to be able to smash through those walls of ice relatively easily. And considering the fact that the more big ice attacks that Todoroki is forced to use, especially if he is on this constant defense, he is going to get slower and slower. While Invincible, on the other hand, isn't going to get any slower. He's going to continue to be much faster than Todoroki. However, that gap in their speed is just going to increase as Todoroki is forced to utilize his quirk more and more to keep Invincible away. And considering the fact that although Mark is a very kind person, I think it is pretty safe to say that he isn't going to do what Deku did in the battle against Todoroki. He isn't going to goat him into utilizing his left side. He's not going to try to break through those walls that Todoroki had up. So it does stand to reason that Todoroki ends up never utilizing his left side in this fight. Now, if he did hypothetically utilize those strong attacks that he can use when he utilizes his left side, then I do think this battle goes from a 7 to 8 win state for Invincible to maybe a 6 out of 10 win states for Invincible. Because I think if Todoroki manages to hit Invincible with the attack that he fired at Midoriya at the end of their battle, it does stand to reason that attack would probably do enough damage to not only knock out Invincible, but at the very least, it would probably send him flying out of the arena, gaining Todoroki the victory in this moment. However, even though that is the case if he utilizes his left side, I truly believe that in this moment, in this battle, he wouldn't use his left side. He wouldn't be provoked into doing so like he was in his battle with Deku. And considering the fact that even if he did utilize his left side, he would still likely lose 6 out of 10 times, I am still giving Invincible the ultimate victory in this battle. And then that would bring us to the last matchup, and that last matchup would be Invincible versus Deku. Now, this fight, especially if it happened later in MHA, would be a lot closer and the outcome would be a lot different. However, there are a couple of things that we have to take into account. Invincible, once again, has a clear edge when it comes to speed. He also has a clear edge because he has the ability to control his powers. This is before Midoriya learned control over One for All. He doesn't even have the ability to utilize full Calling. So it does stand to reason that not only would Invincible be a lot quicker in these moments, he'd be able to dodge a lot of Midoriya's attacks. So even if he used One For All at 100% like he did against Todoroki multiple times throughout their fight, breaking his bones in the process, it does stand to reason that Invincible probably would be able to dodge these attacks relatively easily. And if that happens 2 to 3 times, Midoriya is probably going to be relatively incapacitated. He's going to be incredibly slow. And at the time that inevitably happens in their fight, Invincible is going to be able to just end the battle relatively quickly. He's going to be able to speed blitz Midoriya. He's going to be able to probably one-shot Midoriya and knock him unconscious. However, to be fair to Deku, if he is able to land even one of his punches at 100%, it is going to absolutely knock Invincible out. So that's why I feel like this fight is closer to a 50-50 split. However, it really comes down to speed at the end of the day and Midoriya's lack of control with One For All up to this point. So if he's able to hypothetically land one punch on Invincible, the fight is going to be over. However, the same can be said for Invincible. If he is able to land 1 to 2 punches on Midoriya, the fight is also probably going to be over. So considering the fact that it is going to come down to who can essentially hit the other one first, I think it does stand to reason that the person who has, number 1, better control of their abilities, and number 2, a greater ability to utilize great speeds, it makes sense they would be declared the ultimate victor in the end. So that's why at the end of the UA Sports Festival, the person who would inevitably be crowned the winner would be Invincible. Once again, garnering even more respect, not only from the teachers and the staff, but also from his fellow students. And this would help to create a greater bond between a lot of them, specifically between him and Midoriya. I feel like Midoriya, as someone who is seen as someone without a quirk, would have a great deal of empathy for someone like Invincible. Because keep in mind, Invincible doesn't have a quirk. He is just someone who is different. So I feel like he would inevitably form a great bond with someone like Midoriya. And this would lead to a really impactful friendship for both of them moving forward. Now, the next and final step in the journey for Invincible to become a hero in the MHA world would be the Provisional Licensing Exam. And this is probably going to be one of the easiest exams that Invincible has taken. You see, we know the goal of the first part of the Provisional Licensing Exam, and that is to simply hit targets with balls given to you, and once you knock out 2 people, you succeed and move on to the next round. Considering the fact that at this point, I don't think there is anyone that is faster than Invincible, and there aren't many people that have the ability to fly, it does stand to reason that Invincible would be able to gain these points relatively quickly. He wouldn't even have to throw the balls at the targets. He could just fly them over to someone, touch the target, and simply score points. And he'd probably end up being one of the first people to finish the first portion of this Provisional Licensing Exam. And when it comes to the second part of this exam, I also believe he'd probably end up finishing as one of the best participants in this exam for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, we know how much Invincible cares about saving people. That is something he genuinely wants to do. And also, he has insane strength. He's going to be able to maneuver throughout those dangerous structures relatively easily. And not only that, he's going to be able to carry multiple people over to safety, utilizing his flight, ensuring they get there in probably the fastest and safest way possible. This is going to ensure that he doesn't lose any points. Now, the most difficult of this battle for him is without a doubt when a villain inevitably shows up, specifically because we know who the villain is that shows up. And I know what you might be thinking, it's Gang Orca. It's no one that crazy. However, what you might be forgetting is that Gang Orca's main thing is his Sonic Blast, something that not only Invincible, but all Viltrumites have a great weakness too. This messes up their equilibrium. It's something we literally saw Cecil weaponize in Season 3. So if hypothetically Invincible goes to take on this villain and takes out a bunch of the henchmen, but gets distracted and inevitably gets hit by this Sonic Blast, he's going to be rendered incapacitated. He's going to be taken out by Gang Orca. Now, if that happens, would that result in him actually failing the exam? No, I don't think that's the case for a couple of reasons, mostly because it isn't that bad getting taken out by a literal pro hero, and Invincible would have still shown a tremendous amount of guts, not only saving a lot of people, but putting himself on the front line to take out a bunch of the villains. And considering the fact that there are other students there, it would stand to reason that other people would be there to help Invincible in this moment. So even if he does get incapacitated by Gang Orca utilizing his Sonic Blast, it does stand to reason that Invincible would likely have backup right there to assist him in that moment, resulting in him losing a lot less points. However, this is also only if Gang Orca is able to hit Invincible with that Sonic Blast. Considering the fact that Invincible is once again probably the fastest person there and one of the only people that has the ability to fly, it does stand to reason that he could probably just speed blitz Gang Orca. We saw that Gang Orca did start to sustain damage, especially when he took a kick from Midoriya in that moment. And considering that wasn't a full powered smash from Midoriya, it does stand to reason that a full-blown attack from Invincible could probably do a lot of damage to Gang Orca. And arguably, it could even potentially knock him out in one shot. And I feel like if this happens, Invincible could actually end the test with a perfect score. And like I said, even if he does get hit with that Sonic Blast, there is a lot of evidence to show that he wouldn't lose enough points to fail this exam. So after everything, after the exam is over, Invincible would be granted his provisional license. He would officially become a hero. But then what would happen after that? Would he rise through the ranks and become one of the top 10 heroes? Well, in my opinion, yes, absolutely. Invincible could end up one of the top 2 or 3 heroes in the My Hero Academia universe. Now, the bigger question is, what would his dad do if he found out? What would his dad do, who was sent there to conquer the planet, if he found out his son was this committed to the planet Earth? Would he suddenly change his mind, or would he inevitably attack, leading to a confrontation between him and the top 10 heroes of the MHA universe? Well, that will be a question for next week's video, so make sure to subscribe. But I'm interested to hear from all of you. How do you think Invincible would do in the MHA universe? Do you agree that he could end up a top 3 hero in the MHA verse, or do you think there's potential that he be shunned by society and potentially even corrupted by someone like All For One? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.